Welcome everybody to the final of our community conversation event series. This event is going to be specifically for the LASA and special campuses vertical teams. Just for any of you who may have heard from other people how these events are structured or participated in some of the other ones, we're going to be changing the structure a little bit. In past events, we have done this panel style followed by Q&A, but there are a lot of you on this call who submitted a lot of great questions with their registration, which we're very happy to get to. So we will be starting with Q&A. If you don't hear a question that you asked being asked, you can feel free to type that into the chat. So to get started, I would like to address what is probably top of everybody's mind right now, which is what the end of this school year is going to look like. Dr. Mays, if you could speak a little bit to that.
Sure. Again, this year has been, of course, one of the year of all years, and so we've worked to give our students those rites of passage that they normally would participate in, and so students will have graduation this year. Again, unfortunately, they'll be in outdoor stadiums, and so we'll be making sure that we address a lot of those protocols to keep the audience safe. And so students will only be able to bring 4 guests. We'll also be taking temperatures, making sure that we can social distance, and making sure that we do everything that we can to keep the audience and our students safe. We won't have a band this year. We'll actually be porting in music. And so again, those are some of the steps that we're taking to make sure we celebrate, but we celebrate safely. We've also been conducting prom, and so many of our students have already participated in this exercise, and so those have been hosted in venues that are indoor and outdoor. We've also had prepackaged foods, and we've also had those screeners and temperature checks and social distancing in place at proms, and we still have a few more to go, but we're looking forward to our seniors closing out the year in a similar fashion that they would have, in any other circumstance, barring or given all of the safety protocols that we have to honor.
Great, thank you so much. And y'all will forgive me, I totally forgot to start with introductions for our leadership team. I just saw everybody jumping in, all excited with their questions, and I was like, let's do this. But I would definitely like to make sure that our participants know who's on this call. So let's go ahead and do some introductions, starting, of course, with our superintendent, Dr. Elizalde.
Well, thank you so much. I know, Gabriela, you wanted to make sure that we were getting to all the questions, and we had limited time. So I'm Stephanie Elizalde, and I'm truly honored to serve as your superintendent here in Austin ISD. And before we go further, I also want to take a note of personal privilege. We have at least 2 trustees, board members with us. I see Trustee Kevin Foster on with us, and I believe I also saw Trustee Lynn Boswell with us as well. I'm hearing you all can't hear me very well, so let me see what's going on with my. Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate people saying that in the chat. So let me again, Stephanie Elizalde, it is an honor to serve as the superintendent of this great school district, Austin ISD. I want to make sure that I point out at least two of our great trustees who are joining us this evening, Trustee Kevin Foster, and I also think I saw Trustee Lynn Boswell. If I've missed anyone else, one of our other leadership team members will introduce them. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to join us for this community conversation.
Thanks so much, Dr. Elizalde. And next we have Elizabeth Costas.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Costas, Chief Academic Officer. Thank you for joining us tonight.
And Dr. Mays.
Good evening, everyone. Anthony Mays, Chief of Schools. Happy to be here and a part of the conversation.
Dr. Hawley.
Good evening, Stephanie Hawley, Equity Officer, and welcome to the conversation.
And Mr. Brinkman.
Good evening, everyone. Sean Brinkman, Chief Technology Officer, and thanks for your time this evening.
And I believe our Chief of Police, Chief Gonzalez, is not with us on this call today. He's taking a personal day, a much needed personal day, I'm sure. So jumping straight to Ms. Stevens.
Leslie Stevens, Chief of Human Capital. Thank you all for being here.
And Dr. Reach.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jacob Reach, and I'm excited to have joined you here tonight.
Ms. Wallace.
Good evening, Michelle Wallace, Executive Director of the Office of Innovation and Development, and thank you for making time to attend.
Mr. Segura.
Hello, everybody. Tia Segura, Acting Chief of Operations. Very excited to be here. Thank you for the time.
And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Stanford.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I'm Jason Stanford. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
All righty. So jumping back into the extremely exciting topics that we started talking about. A lot of you had questions, understandably, about next school year, including protocols for masking and vaccination, as well as the potential for virtual or hybrid instruction models. So Dr. Elizalde, I would love if you could start by addressing the masks and vaccinations.
Yes, thank you. And I'll try to be quick, but I'll try not to talk too fast so that our interpreters can keep up. I can tend to start talking super fast. With regard to virtual instruction, the legislature is still deciding. There are two bills. Just as a recap, public ISDs are prohibited from offering virtual instruction up until COVID hit. When COVID hit, of course, it was necessary for the commissioner to give us permission under executive order to allow us to do so. However, that is not going to be extended through the next school year. The only way virtual instruction will be available in public ISDs is if the legislature ultimately passes a bill that is currently, and Jacob can tell you later, I'm sure it's not too important to you to know the number, but there are two bills. One is in the House and one is in the Senate. One is a much better bill than the other, but there are a variety of groups that are not in agreement with having a virtual option for schools. And so it's in the middle of debate right now. Separate from that, our plan will be to have as much of a traditional teacher-student interaction, as we know that is the one that is overwhelmingly the most effective, with a few exceptions, of course, but let's go right now with the majority. And face-to-face instruction will be the predominant, if not the only, instructional delivery. Nonetheless, we are committed to ensuring that for the 2021-2022 school year, we do have teachers only deliver one type of instructional delivery. If for some reason virtual and face-to-face are both allowed, and we should opt to do both, teachers will not be simultaneously or concurrently doing those as they have had to do this year. So that will be something that we'll continue to work towards to ensure that teachers are not put in this situation of having to deliver both to those in the room and those on Zoom. There have been questions about masking. Masking will be whatever the CDC recommendations. We will be going with the science, and I'm sure, as everyone knows, there's no answer that's going to please everyone with masking. And so the best way for us to move forward is to ensure that we are aligned with the science, with the CDC guidelines. We are still far away from the next school year beginning, and there will be changes, I feel certain, to the CDC guidelines as vaccinations continue to ramp up. We are, of course, encouraging all of our 16 and up students to get vaccinated. We're going to continue to work with organizations to partner to expand and utilize our facilities, our schools, as a location to distribute vaccines. And we are anxiously anticipating the approval of the 12 to 15 vaccination age group so that we would also be able to offer vaccines. But what we've noticed is we do better with our community if we have our schools as the sites for some of those vaccination distribution. So we're going to continue to partner to see if we can continue to increase the number of vaccines that are out there. Now that all adults have had an opportunity and continue to have those opportunities, we want all of our students that would be eligible to also have that. So the one area we're talking about making some adjustment for this next school year would be with regard to the quarantining time. Currently, we went with the most conservative of 14 days. Now that transmission is not as high, next year we will probably be looking at only a 10-day quarantining time. And we would also be looking at masks being optional during the recess or PE if it is outdoors, so that when students are outdoors and can be socially distanced, that we would be able to allow students to be optional with masks. That is still in conversation, but we are in all likelihood leaning in that direction because the data are supporting that those are still safe practices.
Before we move to the next question, if I could just take a minute. Stacia Crescenzi, I'm the principal of the Liberal Arts and Science Academy. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. I just wanted to announce that earlier today, Mr. Bailey, the LBJ principal, and I set a date for the vaccination clinic that's going to happen on our campus. And so you get the first information for that. If you're at the meeting, keep your eye on the principal's message Sunday. I'll give all the details then. But since it came up, I wanted to announce that we will be holding our vaccination clinic on the 18th. And what we're so excited about with that date is we're really hoping that the vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds will be approved by that point, so that all our students and some of the surrounding students at the feeder middle schools for LBJ will be able to be vaccinated if their families wish, on the 18th, 3:30 to 6. So keep your eye out. We're really excited to announce that.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for that info. Moving on, received quite a lot of questions about staffing. Of course, we know there have been some changes to our staffing formula, and that has affected our campus staffing in different ways. So Ms. Stevens, our Chief Human Capital Officer, I would love it if you could talk a little bit about our new staffing formula and how it's affected our campuses.
Yes, thank you. In order to frame how we staff at campuses, I'm gonna go backward a little bit to go forward. So in the spring of 2020, our district was projected to have a student enrollment this year of 80,000 students. So when they do those projections in the spring, we staff to that projection. And as you all know, right now we're sitting with about 74 to 75,000 students enrolled. So we have a 5,000 to 6,000 student difference in terms of what we staffed for versus the number of students that are enrolled. So moving forward to the spring of 2021, our projections came out again, and our projections are for 77,000 for next school year. So we're staffing to 77,000, which is still a 3,000 student difference from a year ago. So while we're anticipating more students next year, we're still not at that 80,000 student rate that we staffed at. So I say that in that it honestly gave us an opportunity to look at some of our staffing and incorporate the best we could some equity principles within our staffing guidelines. So we've applied weights to certain areas like our student enrollment at campuses based on the number of economically disadvantaged students on those campuses, because we know that that would allow for more resources to be at those campuses where we have a greater student need. Another equity lens we looked at was how we staff at our elementary schools. So in the past, they were just given a number for a grade level, and let's say they were given 40 and they would be given 2 teachers because they divided by 22. This year, we did the division by program first. So let's say I was projected to have 30 ESL gen ed students and 8 bilingual. Well, then we used those numbers and staffed so that principals could hire earlier for bilingual teachers and for ESL teachers to meet programmatic needs. So those were just a couple of changes in terms of like what we did overall. But our biggest change from campus to campus in terms of staffing truly have to do with a reduction in the projected enrollment for next year. So I'm going to use a secondary example just because that's kind of what I've used, because that's probably where the biggest pieces come in. So at a secondary campus, the way it works is we take their projected student enrollment, we apply the weight for the number of economically disadvantaged students, and then we get a new projected enrollment that's weighted. That is the number that then we divide by, and we reduced that number this year to 28. In previous years, that number had been at 29. So we reduced that to 28. And then we still did some calculations for 6 out of 8. So that number gives us the number of teacher allocations for a campus. And so let's say a campus was going to get 80 allocations. At that point on campuses, and this is a traditional practice at a secondary school, they hand out student choice sheets. Students select their courses for the following school year. They do tallies for each of those courses, and then they look at where are the students choosing, what courses are they choosing, and then from there, how many sections of that course do I need? So if I had 220 incoming freshmen that need English 1, and I say, okay, each one of my English classes is going to have 30 students, I divide by that, and that's how many sections of English I need. So the number we use to divide, because this was asked earlier, was 28, which, like I said, was a reduction from the previous formula that they used. That doesn't mean that every class is going to have 28. So if you all think back to your high school days, which for me was a really long time ago, but like PE classes have more than 28. PE classes might have 50 every period. So then another class at that same period is going to have less than 28. But then you have other classes, and I'll be honest, Art 1 seems to be a really popular course. It may have 35 in a period, and then the next period may have 38. And so what a high school principal is tasked with is looking at those choices and making a master schedule that meets the student needs, and then looking at what staff do I have for what positions. And I will tell you, so that was level 1 of our staffing. Then we did provide principals an opportunity to say, okay, I've done that and I'm having some difficulty. And so in those cases, we did work either directly with principals, or we worked through school leadership to look at specific cases to see what is it about your master schedule that isn't working, or is there something like truly unique and interesting on your campus that you actually need something else. And so we've worked through those. And so while overall a master schedule needs to be effective and efficient, it also needs to first and foremost meet the needs of the students. And so I know we did have some community questions, and I did want to respond to some of those. So some of those have to be, some of those are around counselors. And I'm just going to tell you, in essence, what we did. At the high school level, previously, the ratio was 1 counselor to 450 students. Right now, for 21-22, our ratio is one counselor to 350 students. And then at elementary, we didn't change it, and it is 1 to 450. So we give the bucket of counselors to the campus, and campuses decide how they want to divide up the tasks on a campus. So some campuses may say, okay, this counselor is in charge of A through F, this counselor is in charge of F through L, in that manner. Some may do it by grade level and say you're responsible for the 9th graders, 10th, and move on up with them. They may have somebody that's just specifically working with seniors on college applications and all of that. So those duties are then assigned by the campus level. And so I know and actually there's a couple of questions on here specifically about LASA. And I do want everyone to know that we worked with individual principals. And so we are really trying to be financial stewards of the district, but also allow for our schools to become more efficient and effective. So I'm hoping, like, through the process that we worked with principals, that they feel like we're in a good spot. That's not to say that we won't tweak things that we're done, that this is like the perfect, staffing guideline document ever, and it's not. And so as we learn, we will make those adjustments as needed. And so hopefully that gives everybody a broad overview of how that worked.
Thank you so much, Ms.
If I can just, there were a lot of questions about the counselors, and I just want to reassure the community members that are here that we're absolutely committed to finding ways to continue to serve our students. Things may look differently in the years ahead, and the staff has already come together to agree to have conversations next year about how we may have to redesign some things to open up some BTO space or staffing availability to continue to offer the counseling services that meet our individual students' needs. So know that at the campus level, that's an ongoing conversation that the entire staff is interested and wants to get behind to solve for the future.
Thank you so much. So in a similar kind of vein, as we talk about staffing and funding staff positions, I'm sure many of you on this call heard last week that the federal COVID relief funds are being released by the state to school districts. And I would love if one of our leaders could talk a little bit about when we can expect to see those and what we might be using them for.
Thanks for that question. I may need Dr. Reach and/or George Goganas to help out with this one. So this last set, well, I say last set, finally we are getting some money, and we're very glad we're getting some money. However, it's not that simple. We still have to apply for the money, and we still have to jump through some hoops for the money, and there are still some rules connected to the dollars. What I do want to remind everyone, and Dr. Reach or George will correct me on the amount. I think it's 156 million on this particular amount of funds that are being released through the ESSER funds. In ESSER 1, just to remind everyone, we were supposed to get $17 million. And then you hear people say, well, no, in the state of Texas, they supplanted. So what we mean by that, all this jargon that we create in education, I think is sometimes to obscure the truth, is the fact that the state said, well, we're going to give you $17 million, but we are going to take $17 million from your regular funding to cover the $17 million that we're giving you. So in essence, we saw zero from that first $17 million. Now, all the other states did not do that, except for New York. New York and Texas have been the ones that have not released the funds, and when they did release the funds, they supplanted. This next time, it sounds like we will be able to receive some of those dollars. It is a significant amount of money, without a doubt. It's 100 and, if I got it right, 156. The concern is they have rules in how we can use those funds. They cannot be recurring costs because it's one-time money. So if you can imagine for a minute, if we hire a whole lot of people, we do have to make sure that if we were doing that, we would also be prepared to let people go if we were doing that, because we don't keep getting this $156 million over time. The second thing is, they are still having a few arguments about whether there will be some requirements to obtain the dollar. So they're saying it has to be directly connected to COVID. So they're not letting anyone do like salary increases with these dollars. They're not adding, you can add positions if you're adding them specifically to say that they're COVID related. And then you have to be able to tell people then they wouldn't have a job in 2 years or whatever the length of time that the dollars would run out. One of the interesting things that came up yesterday in the Texas Superintendent Association call is that we just discovered that the federal government is now indicating that in order to stay eligible for these funds, you will have to maintain a mask requirement. You know, there's some surrounding districts that are already moving to masks being optional the whole day for next school year. And I've had some emails, certainly from some parents, that might want us to move in that direction. We will not be moving in that direction unless the CDC is clear, but now these dollars are tied to whether we will be in alignment with CDC or not. So as you can tell, that just came out yesterday, and there are a lot of moving parts to this money. It also requires us to say that it is specifically for closing learning losses due to COVID. So that's still broad, yet very narrow. Dr. Reach, do you have something else to add that maybe I missed that's a highlight? You're on mute, Dr. Reach.
Thank you very much. So I really think that covered all the high points. The one thing I would mention is this CARES funding for ESSER 2, which we're still waiting on from the state. The state is still trying to determine what that will mean for higher education funding, which is tied in the same bucket, and they're trying to work that out. But we're hoping that that could also lead to some more funds, and we're looking forward to more information on ESSER 2. But I think everything that you covered on ESSER 3 is correct. And you know what we want to let our community know and get ready for is that we do need input. We need feedback on these funds, and we want to be reaching out to our community, our students, our families, our staff to understand how we can best utilize these funds. And we'll be doing that very quickly coming up now.
Thank you so much, Drs. Elizalde and Reach. A quick clarifying question that was asked in the chat. Would those funds be able to be used to cover the costs of laptops and tablets so that we could reinvest our money in other things?
Yes, they could. So there are,
go ahead, Jacob.
I apologize. Yeah, so there are 15 allowable buckets on how these funds can be spent. It does include technology, things like purchasing PPE, facility improvements, as Dr. Elizalde mentioned, addressing learning loss, which is the federal term that they're using, mental health supports for students. So we will try and look at how we can fit our needs into those buckets. But I think to directly address the question on laptops that had already been purchased, we can also reimburse for some of those unexpected costs that we had, such as the laptops. I think George is on and he can share, but I believe we had $55 million worth of unexpected costs due to COVID.
And then did we hear correctly that those funds would be, could potentially be tied to the requirement for masks?
That's correct.
Yes.
And there's just one statement or two that are that's in some of the wording that they've provided thus far that says something to the effect of must be in alignment with, I think they may even mention CDC guidelines regarding masking, something to that effect, because they don't know what the guidelines are going to be come August, but they're also saying you have to be careful. And so part of that is if some districts, it won't be us, but if some districts do say they're going to go optional with masks and then have to go back and change that that's going to cause additional, angst across any community, right? And so we need to be, as much as we would like to quickly resolve, here's what we're going to do with the money, here's how we're going to do it, we really need to be thoughtful. We really need to engage our community. Now we need to let our community, the same rules we know, which is what are the buckets, what are the parameters, so that at that point, we're not just saying, here's this money, what would you like to do? Because we know that there are already guardrails and we need to communicate that. I did see in the chat a couple of questions about mental health counselors. That is part of the reason why, even though we had fewer students, we did not reduce the number of counselors in the district, so that we would reduce the number of students per counselor, particularly at secondary schools where the number of requirements at when you're a high school counselor and there's so many things leading up to graduation, leading up to scholarships, leading up to FAFSA forms. And so we would need to make sure that we did not have, again, a reduction of counselors. So we should have fewer students per counselor, as was described earlier, but that could be an area, and mental health in particular is a large, broad category that Ms. Casas and her team are working on expanding, so that there will be a continuum of services for students in our district, depending upon their needs. So the short answer to that particular question would be that we would absolutely want to continue to see if those dollars could be used for that. Our biggest concern is going to be, how will we find the revenue to keep those positions once the money is gone? So any positions that are tied to these dollars, I just have to reiterate, long term, I have to keep thinking about, how do I make sure that either we're saying these positions are only temporary, or that we're thinking about how will we be able to sustain these positions over time.
Great, thanks so much. And I know this is a very complex and rapidly changing topic of conversation. So I'm sure we'll continue to see changes in what we are and aren't able to use those funds for as we move forward. So since we have our special campuses, including our magnet schools, represented on this call today, we received quite a lot of questions that were specific to magnet programming, specifically academic rigor and programming for high achieving students. So I would love it if our leaders could speak a little bit to our vision for magnet programming and our plans to continue the rigorous academics offered by our magnet schools.
Well, I don't think any of our changes have any effect on the level of rigor and the outstanding outcomes that our magnet schools have had. But, and I certainly don't want to put any of our principals on point, but they were so kind and generous to be here this evening. If any of our principals would like to address that concern from our parents, and I would say probably Ms. Principal Crescenzi, is there something you'd like to say with regard to how are we going to ensure that we maintain that level of rigor and outstanding outcomes, LASA being number 4 in the nation of best performing high schools?
We're committed to continuing to provide students what they need academically so that they struggle at the high school level. And then when they leave and they're no longer living at home and they're at the college level, then it's easier for them. And maybe they don't have some of those pitfalls that the rest of us discovered when we first went to college or grad school and had to struggle. And in talking with staff, as I think our bigger concern aren't the budget cuts, but how we're going to help students transition from primarily being at home this last 14 months to being back on campus. And although recognizing that rigor is important, still easing them into what it's like to be on a high school campus with 1,300 other teenagers. I think really that's our bigger concern. Teachers are feeling really confident about their curriculum for next year, and the budget cuts really aren't impacting that at all.
Great, thanks so much. We had a question in the chat from one of our participants who would love to hear from the superintendent, from Dr. Elizalde, about your vision for magnet education and AISD broadly, what that would look like in 3 years, 5 years, and so on.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's undoubtedly one of the reasons that some parents choose Austin ISD is because of our magnet campuses. And so I think this is an opportunity. There are two things. One is we're really working to ensure that we get, that we can overcome the challenges in our budget as a result of COVID, so that we don't end up in this situation over time, right? So one is to make the adjustments that are necessary so that this isn't a continually recurring theme. Some of that could be helped by some of the ESSER dollars, but magnet education is a critical option. It's a critical choice for many of our families. As a matter of fact, I'd like us to actually think about how can we expand some of these opportunities, knowing that there are a number of individuals who apply and don't get in to some of our most acclaimed magnet programs. How can we ensure that there's also greater accessibility for these programs for many, many, many of our students? That could mean, you know, as we move to different facilities, is there an opportunity to expand the number of seats that are available at a particular school? I happen to know, as I was studying the history of LASA over the last few years, Principal Crescenzi is always pushing that envelope to see how many more students she can put in to her facility. I really would like that to be not something that just a principal is dedicated to doing, but that we as a district are supporting that. That could also mean maybe there's some opportunities for expansion in some other parts of our town, maybe parts of our community. Maybe there's an opportunity to duplicate. You know, the best opportunity for us to expand is if we have, as we do these outstanding programs, how can we replicate them? And having the expertise here in our district and being able to replicate them in other parts of our community could also be a way for us to expand those opportunities. We want to really work not to an either or, we want to do a both and. We want to make sure that we are providing as many options as possible. This has just been an extremely challenging budget year. And I'm obviously not doing a very good job of trying to communicate just what the challenges are overall and our dedication in ensuring that while we may have to make some adjustments on positions this year, we also wanted to ensure that individuals were not being affected by losing their jobs because of primarily at the campus level, where that is the heart of our work, that is what makes education work. And so I assure you that none of these are decisions that I take lightly and that I don't recognize there are going to be some repercussions. And we're working really hard to get ourselves into a spot where cuts would not be conversations that we would be having. Thank you so much for asking that question.
Great, thank you, Dr. Elizalde. I'm seeing one of our participants has their hand up. Bonnie Chatterjee, forgive me if I've mispronounced. You can feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I posted my question in the chat. I think it was the same question as the question from Magna. Thank you.
Great, okay. So while we're on the topic of LASA, we had a handful of questions about the transition to the new campus and what that process will look like, specifically about transportation options. Maybe Mr. Seguro, our Chief Operations Officer, might be able to speak a little bit to that.
About the transitions to the new home?
Yes.
Absolutely. So excited to do so. You know, one of the things that we're doing within operations is ensuring that all of our new facilities funded by the 2017 bond program move into their new homes seamlessly and effortlessly. Certainly, there's been a lot of planning to get the LASA community to prepare for the move this coming summer, and we're happy to say that we're on schedule. I know our team's been working very, very closely with the LASA community to ensure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. As of now, we anticipate full move-in by August 6th. As is always the case, there's going to be some bumps in the road between now and then, but we're confident with the planning that's taken place. We're well positioned to have all the students in the new space by the beginning of the new school year. And so, we're really excited, and, we'll continue to prepare and communicate, at every point along the way.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Segura, we had a couple of questions about transportation options, expanded transportation options to the new LASA campus. If you could speak to that at all, or perhaps provide in the chat somebody to contact for the participants who are interested.
Absolutely. So I'll put Chris Hafizadeh is the Executive Director of Transportation, and he's in the process right now of evaluating routes. Certainly with the new location of LASA, we anticipate a reduction in travel duration for many of our students traveling to the new LASA location. But as of right now, we're evaluating routes. That process begins in earnest this month and will continue for the next 4 or 5 weeks. And so if there are any adjustments or changes, we'll certainly communicate those to all of our school communities, including LASA. But I will put that information in the chat, and I will also include mine as well.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Segura, if I can just add to that, I think one of the things that we're anticipating is going to cut down on that bus travel time is that although the morning bus is still going to stop at Keeling Middle School, students aren't getting off the bus onto waiting for a shuttle and then taking a shuttle to LASA. Keeling students will get off and go straight into school, and then the bus will continue, and LASA will just be the second stop. And we really do anticipate that cutting down on a good bit of that travel time. So that's going to be way more efficient, and I think you're going to be super pleased with that change.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Great. And another question that I saw in the chat as it relates to high achieving students was, how will you balance the district's commitment to magnet education with the needs of high achieving students across the district who are not enrolled in magnets?
I think that's the entire design that we have going, a both and, not an either or. And so as we evaluate each and every school, we start off with a foundational approach of resources that are needed, of course, with the most important resource being the classroom teacher. And then from there, what other additional resources are necessary in that tier two level of addressing programmatic needs at certain campuses. And so whether that's a magnet or whether that's a comprehensive school, all of our students all have needs, and we need to work to ensure that we really do it's not about, I think that is part of the hard work of equity through our training, is we need to continue to focus on both and, not an either or. And in this particular year, I just have to continue to reemphasize that the largest portion of our challenges are twofold. One, were the extreme expenses connected to COVID, and two was the loss of student enrollment, which equates to a loss of revenue. And so if you can think about your own personal budget, whatever we make and whatever we spend is kind of how you create your own budget. And so knowing that we've had a loss of enrollment, we have to make the adjustments because our revenue that we had expected for the 2021 school year is going to be lower. So we expected a certain amount of dollars. We expected X, and the amount of dollars we're actually going to get is actually going to be X minus 1, whatever that 1 ends up being. And so we are also planning to ensure that this is something that can be not a recurring theme. This is uncomfortable for every single person, and please know it is very uncomfortable as well. That's why we wanted to have community conversations, so that even though they're tough conversations and we have to address your questions, the best way for us to build those relationships is just to spend time with you and answering the questions that you absolutely deserve responses from us.
I would add to that. And I think we're all focused on giving every child every day what we call the good stuff. And so we have, of course, Mr. Hicks and Dr. Stout on the call, and so we're focused on our elementary and secondary schools working together to make sure that we evaluate what we have within each and every one of our schools, and that we work to provide much needed program to support all of our students getting access to high-level programs, so that they can all see the success that we want for all of our kids within this district. And so we look forward to meeting those needs despite the challenging circumstances, but we'll be working hard to make sure that all of our kids get access to the good stuff.
Awesome, thank you. And one more question that I wanted to make sure that we get to answer is related to school closures that we had heard about before the pandemic. Dr. Elizalde, can you speak a little bit to where we're at with that and what we can anticipate going forward?
All school closures that were in that original plan prior to my arrival and joining the team, I have put on a complete hold. We have to address our challenges, not from a closure perspective, but from the perspective of what were the conditions that contributed that we have control over. Some of the conditions that have contributed to loss of enrollment, schools don't control, gentrification being one of them. But there are other things that we are hearing do contribute. One of the main indicators that we heard again over and over again happened to have been transportation. There are a few others, but transportation was a common theme. And while many of you may not necessarily have individuals in those communities, because of the question being asked, I want to give the example. Charter schools in certain parts of our community, because they do get funding on a different structure, are able to provide transportation to students who may live as close as half a mile away. In Austin ISD, we follow the Texas Education Guidelines, which means we're only going to get reimbursed for transportation costs for students who live outside of a 2-mile radius from a school. So a parent, as you can imagine, who may have other younger children, who may have challenges to walk their children to school, even if it is half a mile away, would choose a charter school in many instances because the bus is going to come right by their apartment complex or where they're living. So we had to ask ourselves, is this a condition that can change the enrollment at our campuses? And so our chief schools officer, Dr. Anthony Mays, met with principals, and we discovered that they had already surveyed their families. And if we would move to some school areas, this isn't district wide, I want to manage expectations, but for certain communities, if we move to 0.4 0.4 of a mile instead of 2 miles, we can regain some of our students that have been choosing to go to charters, not because they thought they were better schools, but because of that. That means we can change the conditions at our schools. And that's the approach we want to start with, rather than we've lost enrollment, so we need to close the school. I understand all of, what has led up to where we are now. And of course, I wasn't here then, but I am here now. And this will be one of those areas that we will be spending some time on. Let's focus together on improving the conditions of our schools where we have had losses, and those conditions that we can have control over to increase the student enrollment. We know the students are there. Let me close this part with this. We know the students are there. We have over 16,000 students that are currently in charter schools that reside in Austin ISD. So it's not about, do the students actually live in our area? So gentrification absolutely has had an effect. It is not the only effect. And so we want to continue to ask ourselves, what do we need to do? And some of it is programming. Some of it is about, is there a magnet in this part of our community? Would that increase some individuals for choosing Austin ISD? If we can replicate it to the same level of excellence as our current school programming, I think we would see some additional students and some additional families work with us. So it's obviously a very complex, challenging situation, but we are not having conversations about closing schools because we are not there. Right now, where we are is, what do we need to continue to work on and support our campuses? Some of it was marketing. Some of it, I just found out that Campbell has fine arts, and we haven't done anything to promote that particular program. And so if we help those campuses, we can see a return on our investment. And it's going to take all of us to communicate all of the wonderful things that are happening throughout all of our communities.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizalde. With the remaining time that we have left, I'd love for us to kind of take a forward-thinking look and talk a little bit about our strategic plan and about equity and what that means for our district going forward. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Ms. Wallace to talk a little bit about our strategic plan.
Thank you. You may remember if you were watching the strategic plan work last summer, the Board of Trustees approved the strategic framework. And that really is the board level work on the plan. It includes the mission, vision, our values, our priority focus areas. And the board was very clear that equity would serve as the foundation of the strategic plan versus a priority area itself. So we've really been working hard to make sure that we're working closely with Dr. Holly and her team and really incorporating equity into our process all along. You can see our priority focus areas that the board approved are student well-being and achievement, teacher and employee well-being, culture of respect, customer service, and fiscal stewardship and prioritization. And if you go to the next slide, you can see a little bit of the kind of sequence. Once the board approves the framework, then they look to the scorecard, which is how we will be measuring our success with the board. And that was approved last year as well. Then we have been working, Dr. Elizalde and our leadership team, on the strategies and actions then to make progress against the priority focus areas and the scorecard indicators. And those strategies and actions form our strategic plan, or what is also called district improvement plan. We are in that process now, developing strategies, and that we'll actually be sharing that information at a board information session coming up on the 13th. And then we'll work on, department plans and also work with campuses on how the strategic priorities will work on the campuses and how campuses can align their efforts to the priority focus areas. We're very fortunate. I mentioned Dr. Holly and the work of her team. They have done some amazing and extensive community engagement over the last year and a half. And has it been a year and a half? I have no sense of time anymore after this last year. But the Equity Office has gone through the community engagement and also put together an equity action plan and recommendations. And that has been a significant input to the strategic plan work that we've been doing, really trying to crosswalk those themes from the equity action plan and the recommendations that have come out of the extensive engagement with the community. So Dr. Holly, do you want to share a little bit more about the equity action plan and the work of your office?
Yes, and thank you, Michelle. And it has been a year and a half, actually. But one of the ways we wanted to continue the work, so since fall 2019, we've engaged a little over 1,500 people to learn what the district's strengths are and what the district's challenges are and what are some of the solutions. And so as we compile that, the equity director, Dr. Allen, our equity specialist, Dr. Williams Hill, have compiled the equity action plan. And the equity action plan is not a separate plan for the district, but it's to be integrated and infused into our strategic plan. And so we want to make sure that equity, we often say equity gets into our DNA. But one of the ways we want to continue the work and not just have the equity plan as a source document, we've organized an equity advisory committee, and some of you who are on this call are on this committee, and it's great to see you this evening. But this committee is designed to continue to build bridges with the community, and we have a little bit of a different structure. We have 2 community members who serve as co-chairs and 2 staff who serve as co-chairs. And we are welcoming more students by the day into this committee. And the ways that students are getting involved, staff are getting involved, and we still welcome community. And I'm going to ask someone to drop the link to the website so that those of you who are on who want to get involved, we're tackling these issues around, Dr. Elizalde likes to call it the equity flower blossom here. But if you look around the center here, you will see the areas of focus, and they're aligned with the board's priorities. And so we welcome you all to join us because ultimately what this committee will do is provide recommendations to Dr. Elizalde about strengthening the work that we're doing with regard to equity. And so I thank you for the opportunity to share that this evening.
Thanks so much, Dr. Hawley. Last, I would like to take these last couple of minutes to open it up to Ms. Costas, our Chief Academic Officer, to talk a little bit about some of our priorities, especially as it relates to special education. I know we always have a lot of questions about that.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. So as I mentioned in the other group, that we've heard loud and clearly from our community that we have lots of needs in our special education department. So we are restructuring the department and creating a new leadership structure and trying to get that in place by the end of the year. The high priority is the evaluations that we're behind. I'm happy to say that we have about 400 of the 900 that are already at some point in the progress of being completed. So we're working hard to meet our June 30th deadline. So lots to come. We're hiring a new executive director that starts on May 17th. The other thing that I wanted to share, I saw some questions about SEL and mental health, is that we've worked to combine our SEL specialist and our cultural proficiency specialist. So instead of having 10 SEL and 2 cultural proficiency, we're now going to have 13 positions that will do some cross-training to make sure that we have not only a social and emotional learning environment, but it's also culturally proficient. So we're working hard to get all these things in place to be ready for the beginning of the school year.
Thank you so much, Ms. Casas. I'm seeing one of our participants has just raised their hand. You can feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. I have 2 questions actually. One is, the air filtration at Austin schools is not up to par. We need MERV 13 filters, and that's not in place at the moment. Is there any plans to get that in place?
So I can answer that. This is Matthias. I appreciate the question. One of the things that we're always trying to do is to improve the quality of air, and we evaluate that in 3 different ways. One is circulation, one is filtration, and then one is temperature or climate. And so, you know, per CDC guidelines, we're always looking for the opportunity to apply the highest rated MERV filter in all of our facilities that does not limit airflow. So in certain applications, specifically new HVAC systems, we are able to introduce MERV 13 rated filters. In other systems, we cannot quite get that high without compromising the ability for the HVAC system to actually circulate air. So we are making improvements. I do want to point out that most of our systems are running 10s and 13s. In rare instances, we do have 9s, but all of these are above commercial grade filtration systems and perform much higher than residential homes or pretty much any other type of space. We are going to continue to improve these systems over the course of the summer, and certainly we'll be looking at opportunities through the ESSER funds to see if we can even do additional improvements. But I can follow up and send out any additional information you'd like to see in regards to kind of where we are in the process and what that might look like moving forward.
Thank you. My other question has to do with the change that there will be no virtual and in-person training, teaching going on at the same time. And I'm concerned how that will affect the ability of parents to keep their children home when they're, have a slight sore throat or something that doesn't seem all that bad, but, maybe an indication of something. What's going to happen if you have to stay home or if you really should keep your child at home, but, the hurdle is much larger if you can't just simply join in Zoom. And
Mr. Gunther, I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. My apologies if I'm not. We do need to explore, not just because of COVID, but as you've indicated, there could be ways in which we can still reach out to students who may need to be home occasionally, depending on the situation. We haven't solved it yet, but we think there's an opportunity if virtual isn't allowed, in terms of an actual, delivery method. There could still be a way for us to use that to reach students who may have to be again, not able to physically be at school for certain reasons. So we're going to work to see how can that be done in a way that doesn't create an issue for teachers to have to be doing this concurrent kind of model, but at the same time utilizing the fact that we do know from using virtual instruction, even like our meeting today, of course, how can we be able to do this and still learn from it and take advantage of the things that we've learned? So I don't have an actual answer, but it is on our radar and we are working to see how we can utilize that.
thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for taking some time out of your evening to participate, and to all of our leadership team. This series has been such a fantastic opportunity, I think, for all of us to be able to get to know our families, our staff, our communities, the different needs of different vertical teams. And I really hope that this is just the beginning of a long series of continued engagement with our school communities. As a reminder, this session has been recorded. We will be uploading it very soon, hopefully as soon as we can get it all captioned and legally compliant. And if you have any questions that didn't get answered, which I'm sure there were many in the chat that didn't, you can feel free to reach out to me. Again, my name's Gabriella Becker. I've shared my email in the chat. I will also be reviewing over the next couple of days the chat to pull out questions that I know for a fact weren't answered, and I will follow up with you all personally. So thank you everybody for your time and for creating this space.
I'd like to take just a minute as everyone is leaving to again thank our interpreters for keeping up with all of our back and forth, our ASL interpreters and our bilingual interpreters. And Gabriela, we'd like to thank you for also pivoting this evening so that instead of doing our regular, this is what we've done everywhere else, we adjusted because we knew we had a lot of questions. And I know we didn't get to every single one, but we worked to get through them, and we'll get to the ones we didn't, as Gabriela mentioned. We want to really thank you for taking time out of your day to interact with us as we get to learn more about how we can improve. We hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thanks so much, everybody.